Have you ever imagined a world where you could tower over cities or become a tiny speck compared to a blade of grass? In the realm of fantasy, one such adventurer dared to cross the boundaries of the known world and venture into the realms of the extraordinary. His name, my friends, is Lemuel Gulliver. A surgeon by profession, Gulliver was a man of science, but his heart yearned for the thrill of exploration, the allure of the unknown. He'd gaze out into the sea from the decks of the ships he commanded, his captain's hat sitting proudly atop his head. He was a man of great curiosity, a thirst for adventure that couldn't be quenched by the mundane. And what did he find in his voyages, you might ask? Oh, lands far beyond the ordinary, where the rules of nature as we know it were twisted and turned on their heads. Now let's embark on Gulliver's first voyage to the unknown lands. Imagine waking up to find yourself a giant among tiny people. An extraordinary experience indeed, but this is precisely the predicament our protagonist Gulliver finds himself in, as he is shipwrecked and washed ashore in the peculiar land of Lilliput. In this bizarre world, Gulliver is a colossus, towering over the diminutive Lilliputians who stand only 6 inches tall. But size, as we soon discover, isn't always an advantage. Despite his towering stature, Gulliver is swiftly ensnared by these miniature marvels, his immense size no match for their ingenuity and sheer numbers. Captured and hauled off, Gulliver is brought to the Lilliputian emperor. Here he experiences a strange dichotomy, a giant treated with a mix of fear, reverence and curiosity by these tiny beings. Yet, he is also a captive, his freedom held ransom by his captor's curiosity and caution. Over time, however, Gulliver's relationship with the Lilliputians evolves. His immense size, initially a source of fear, becomes a tool of service as he aids the Lilliputians in various tasks. In return, he is granted his freedom and even becomes a trusted advisor to the emperor. Yet the more time he spends in Lilliput, the more he learns about the peculiar customs of its inhabitants. From the way they select their leaders, not by virtue, wisdom, or even strength, but by their skills in rope dancing, to their petty squabbles over which end of a boiled egg should be broken first. These customs, though absurd to Gulliver, are deeply ingrained in the Lilliputian society, leading him to reflect on the arbitrary nature of societal norms. In this tiny world, Gulliver is both a giant and a stranger, his size making him a spectacle, his unfamiliarity making him an outsider. Yet it's through these experiences in Lilliput that Gulliver begins to see his own world through a new lens, questioning the norms and customs he once took for granted. As Gulliver navigates this outlandish world, he finds himself questioning the absurdity of his own society. From being a giant, Gulliver now becomes a miniature in a land of giants. Imagine trading your colossal stature for a tiny one, becoming a speck in a world of towering titans. That's precisely the twist of fate that befalls our intrepid explorer Gulliver as he washes ashore the land of Brobdingnag, a land where a blade of grass towers over you like a redwood, butterflies appear as large as birds, and humans are colossal, 60 feet tall. Gulliver's arrival in Brobdingnag is a stark contrast to his time in Lilliput. He's no longer a giant but a plaything, a novelty, an entertainment for the court. He's carried around in a box, displayed like a curiosity, and even becomes the playmate of the royal princess, Glumdalclitch. But it's not all fun and games. Gulliver's minute size leaves him vulnerable to dangers unimaginable in his previous world. He faces threats from monstrous rats, gigantic wasps, and even the princess's pet monkey. Yet his diminutive stature also offers a unique perspective on the giants around him. Gulliver's encounters with the Brobdingnagians are eye-opening. He observes their flaws and virtues, magnified by their enormous size. Their physical imperfections, from skin blemishes to coarse hair, are no longer minute details but glaring realities. Yet, their moral virtues also loom large. They display a sense of justice, kindness, and rationality that Gulliver finds lacking in his own society. His time in Brobdingnag forces Gulliver to reflect on human nature. He's compelled to confront the human condition's pettiness and grandeur, its capacity for cruelty and kindness, its potential for wisdom and folly. It's a humbling experience, one that prompts Gulliver to reevaluate his own sense of self-importance. In the land of Brobdingnag, Gulliver experiences what it's like to be utterly insignificant. Yet, this insignificance offers him a fresh perspective on life, humanity, and himself. As we continue our journey through Gulliver's travels, we'll see how these experiences shape his worldview and influence his future adventures. So stay tuned as we venture further into the fantastical realms of Jonathan Swift's imagination. What if you encounter a society that values only abstract knowledge? Picture this. Our intrepid explorer Gulliver, fresh from his adventures in lands of tiny and titanic inhabitants, finds his way to a place that defies gravity itself. Laputa, a floating island of intellectuals. Laputa, a place where the inhabitants have their heads quite literally in the clouds, is a stark contrast to the lands Gulliver has traversed thus far. The Lilliputians are a society that prizes the intellect above all else. Their fascination? Mathematics and music. Yes, you heard it right. These are not your everyday garden-variety intellectuals. These are people who breathe, live, and dream in numbers and notes. In this peculiar society, the Lilliputians' obsession with these two disciplines is so intense that they have developed a unique language, composed entirely of musical notes and mathematical equations. A conversation here may sound like a symphony, or a mathematical puzzle depending on how you listen. However, what makes this society even more intriguing is their utter disregard for practical affairs. You see, despite their vast intellectual prowess, the Lilliputians struggle with the most basic of tasks. They can calculate the trajectory of a comet but can't figure out how to dress themselves. They can compose a symphony but can't cook a meal. This is a society where abstract knowledge is exalted while practical skills are left by the wayside. Gulliver, a man of practicality himself, is both fascinated and frustrated by the Lilliputians' way of life. He marvels at their intellectual capacities, their ability to contemplate the mysteries of the universe, but is equally baffled by their inability to manage the simple tasks of everyday life. So he leaves, with a mind full of wonder and a heart full of questions. He leaves behind the floating island of Laputa, its lofty intellectuals, their symphonies of equations, and their confounding paradoxes. Gulliver leaves Laputa perplexed by a society that is knowledgeable yet utterly impractical. These are the tales of his travels, and there's still more to come. Stay tuned. What if horses were the rational beings and humans were the brutes? Picture this for a moment. Now let's dive into the 5th chapter of Gulliver's travels. Gulliver, our intrepid adventurer, finds himself washed up on the shores of a peculiar island, the Land of the Houyhnhnms. Here, he encounters a society where roles are reversed. Intelligent and virtuous horses, known as the Houyhnhnms, are the ruling class, while humans, derogatively referred to as yahoos, are viewed as primitive, uncivilized brutes. The Houyhnhnms, with their calm demeanor and logical minds, represent an ideal society in stark contrast to the yahoos' primitive, savage ways. These horses live in a world free from lies, greed, or malice, a world where reason and virtue reign supreme. Gulliver, desperate to fit in, strives to prove he's more Houyhnhnm than Yahoo. He adapts their language, mirrors their customs, and embraces their rationality. He labors to distance himself from the Yahoos, the reflection of humanity's worst traits. His struggle is both physical and philosophical. Physically, he must convince the Houyhnhnms he is different from the Yahoos, despite their similar appearance. Philosophically, he grapples with the harsh reality that humans like himself could be seen as brutish creatures when stripped of societal norms and conventions. This journey is a profound exploration of the human condition. It forces Gulliver, and by extension us, to question the nature of humanity. Are we inherently rational and virtuous like the Houyhnhnms, or are we fundamentally brutish and savage like the Yahoos? Gulliver's quest to prove he is more horse than Yahoo is a testament to the transformative power of travel. It's about embracing new perspectives, challenging our preconceived notions, and ultimately, understanding ourselves better. As we close this chapter of Gulliver's travels, we're left with a thought-provoking question. What does it mean to be human? Is it our capacity for reason and virtue, or is it our potential for savagery and brutishness? Gulliver's journey among the Houyhnhnms forces him to reflect deeply on human nature, and perhaps it urges us to do the same. After traveling to these extraordinary lands, how does one return to ordinary life? Gulliver grapples with this question as he anchors back home to England. The sights, sounds, and customs of his homeland feel foreign, almost distant to him. Everything that once felt familiar seems strange as he struggles to readjust to his normal life. His travels have upended his worldview, pushing him to reflect on society and human nature. The tiny Lilliputians, the gigantic Brobdingnags, the intellectual Laputans, and the wise Houyhnhnms have all left indelible marks on his perception of life. He finds himself comparing the virtues and vices of these far-flung societies with those of his own. He ponders on the absurdity of wars, the complexity of politics, the irrationality of human behavior, and yet the inherent beauty of our world. These reflections, stirred up by his extraordinary adventures, leave Gulliver and us with a profound understanding. Gulliver's travels, filled with fantastical lands and creatures, shed light on the absurdity, complexity, and beauty of our own world.